I'm speaking with American Eagle Gold, Tony Moreau, CEO, and Neil Prowse, VP of Exploration, and Charlie Gregg, Technical Advisor. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, it's Charlie here.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Rob. It's Tony.
We got the band back together. Well, this is great. We have 4 people on here. I'm going to start with Tony. I know you were at PDAC. I believe you went to Switzerland as well, Swiss Mining Institute. What are your takeaways from those conferences? What is some of the feedback that you received from investors?
Yeah, so a little bit different, PDAC versus Switzerland. So PDAC was a stark contrast from what happened last year. I think last year was kind of still, show me story. People were waiting for results. But this year, a lot of the companies I met with, big funds, et cetera, I think that their biggest question for us was less kind of de-risking the project and more, how can we get into a size big enough that makes sense for our fund? So actually asking me to be a broker to cross trades with them, which are trades that I don't have, which is a good problem to have. It's kind of got people over that, first benchmark, and now they're looking to share. So a lot of my meetings were just, how can we get, 1 million share tranches to put into our funds and hold long term. And that's pretty much the majority of my meetings. Had a lot of big companies come over and ask questions. One big company, not to name names, the interesting thing that they said to us, they said, we've been following you. I had never heard from them before. They said, we've been following you for, since November 2022. We have every single piece of information in the public domain. And, last year we weren't sure if this was going to be something. And they said, now we're at the point that we're pretty sure. And they're asking all the right questions. So whether it's companies or funds, it kind of seemed like we're at kind of at that next point, which kind of speaks to the quality of the team that we had, the drill program that we had, and a little bit of luck that we had, just hitting where we hit, which I guess Charlie will say, if you hit this much, it's not really luck. It's the potential deposit. So that's how the meetings went there. In Switzerland, a little more expensive of a trip than just kind of walking down Bay Street for the meetings, but it was worth it because we got in front of a lot of people that didn't even know about our story. That was my main issue during the last year. Before we came out with 17, just having people know that you exist, knowing that American Eagle is a company with a stock ticker. So my main problem was, people didn't even know American Eagle existed. If they do, they spend 10 seconds. That 2317, I always tell people, it's not why our stock has doubled in this down market. It's why people spend 10 minutes to actually look at our company. And I was kind of starting all over again in Switzerland. I was introducing these big European funds to our story because I hadn't quite got there over the water, but we met with 20 high quality different investors. I think it was a really well worth it kind of campaign. So 2 different types of meetings, but all successful.
Very good. So this question will be for Charlie and Neil. You put out a news release a couple weeks ago outlining 15,000 meter drill program this year. And before you get to that, though, you're going to do some deeper penetrating IP work. Can you tell us what what kind of data are you looking to get from the IP? Are you going to shoot it across the entire property? How's it going to help you?
Well, I'll take that. It's Charlie here. When you look back on the IP that we have, we got this beautiful big chargeability ring kind of around the main Babine Porphyry stock, which is a bit of a red herring in a way. I mean, it shows it's a big system, but what we've been chasing really is more along the west side and a sort of a subsidiary feature. So it can be sort of difficult to look through that big circular kind of feature to kind of get a better handle on where the real goods are that we've been hitting. So in order to do that, what we're looking at is to try and get a better data density, particularly to depth. I mean, that big chargeability ring wasn't from surveys we did. That's from pretty old historical data dating back to Noranda in the late 60s and early 70s. And we've only done 3 lines of IP ourselves across the property. So, we're going to augment that data, and then not only be able to look at the grand scheme of things and try to pick out some other features, but to look in more detail by kind of windowing out that really high chargeability and looking in more detail at a limited area within the limits of these long lines that we're going to do that actually span the entire thing. The geophysicists, as I understand it, kind of are trying to take out that really high chargeability signature to try and look at these features a bit closer to surface and how those things can be drawn down to quite a depth. So we'll be looking at getting more detail at depth, but partly by kind of windowing out the kind of regional noise. It's not really regional noise, it's really property scale noise, but that really high chargeability signature that forms a big ring around the porphyry stock makes it hard to look at the details of areas that we've been drilling. Does that make sense, I hope?
Yeah, it makes sense. Tell us why the really high chargeability is something that you want to filter out, and can you explain to laymen like myself this IP shoulder, signature, and why that is an important targeting, method?
Well, number one, I wouldn't call any IP a direct targeting thing. It gets you in the ballpark. But this ballpark at NAC is a pretty big ballpark. The chargeability signature of the ring around the entire kind of porphyry stock is very highly chargeable, and so it makes looking at features that are still chargeable a little more difficult if they're sort of lower millivolt per volt response. So chargeability reflects the presence of sulphides, sometimes magnetite. Well, magnetite as well. They're not as chargeable as sulphide, so that's chalcopyrite, pyrite, pyrite, bornite, etc. The things we really want to find, the copper-bearing minerals. Other than pyrite is obviously not copper-bearing in general, might have a tiny little bit in it, but the copper-bearing minerals are what we're after, and we would prefer not to have much pyrite. Well, the chargeability ring is a lot of pyrite and pyrite where it's been drilled, and it's where the most sulfides are. So it really gives a big response, and it kind of swamps out the signature of the subsidiary features like what we interpret to be the main mineralizing system, which is kind of north trending and on the west side of the stock within that chargeability ring. So if we can kind of window out that really high response, we might be able to see these other signatures. And that's why, we're sort of looking at the shoulder. It's still chargeable. That the shoulder kind of reflects more of that chargeability ring than the thing we're really targeting. So we're sort of trying to de-emphasize the pyrite, pyrite halo, and emphasize the sort of more chalcopyrite, bornite, chalcocite kind of signature.
Okay. And then I want to go back to Tony. We'll kind of go back and forth a little bit here. What is American Eagle's current cash position, and what would you guess, or what would you estimate the budget is for the drill program?
Our current cash position, I was just talking to my CFO, is around $6 million right now. It changes a little bit. We get warrants coming in pretty much every day. It's a nice problem to actually have your balance sheet growing naturally as a junior company. Our budget right now, 15,000 meters, is $6 million. Roughly $400 all in per meter. So that's that. But we forecast we'll have around $10 million come June. The rest of our warrants will give us a certain amount of money, and then hopefully, the thought is, Teck will probably top up to maintain their 19.9, so that will more than cover, not only the $6 million program, but give us the optionality to expand, to possibly even a 20,000 meter program, which is good. I think we're just trying to figure out right now what the best way to drill is. Do we start with one rig and transition to 2? Do we do 2 all the way through? Do we possibly stop in November and then start again in January and drill through March and have a little bit less period where we're having 2 rigs? I think there's good things for both. A little bit more expensive to drill all the way throughout the winter, but it gives you catalyst all the way throughout the year. It's been I wouldn't say it's challenging, but it's been a lot of hard work just keeping the story out there, with really no news in the last 4 months. But it's been really rewarding seeing our stock appreciate with, kind of a weak copper market and no news. It kind of shows, people are tuning in to this company and, buying despite the lack of catalyst. I said this before, there's 3 rotations coming into our stock. It's people that like BC projects. If you're investing in a BC project, this one is the one to invest in. There's no other project like it that gives you a catalyst with a company that's fully funded. So you got rotations coming out of the other BC projects out there that don't have the stuff that we have. Second of all, you're going to start seeing a lot of rotations of people that rotate out of North American plays to go in South American plays to catch those catalysts. So people are coming out of the news releases coming out from June till July. They'll be coming into Canadian companies. I think American Eagle is going to get a lot of those investors. And then the third one is the closer we march towards drilling in May, the more investors are going to come in. I call them FOMO investors, people that don't want to miss those initial results, and they'll be jockeying for positions. So I always tell people we're a lot closer to when we're drilling compared to when our last news release came out of drill results. So if you see the price action that's happened, there's a lot of positive price discovery that's on its way. So that's a long answer, but that's the cash position and kind of what we're looking at in the next couple of months.
You mentioned warrants, Tony. Can you give a ballpark of how many warrants are still outstanding?
Yeah, there's less than half the outstanding warrants from that are due in May. Our largest warrant holder has about 1.5 million warrants. He's the only one that actually called offering him a cross. He still holds all of his original shares. He bought into the original IPO in May 2021. He wrote it down to 2 cents. He kept hold of it. And that's why we kind of extended those warrants. And I said, listen, you have a big position. We can give you a cross to one of those funds I was talking about earlier. And I said, Tony, I want to hold on to these shares. So I guess the point is even our biggest warrant holder that still has warrants outstanding is holding on to them. And I guess one of the big things, the takeaways that I got is a lot of these funds, a lot of these people, they said they're just going to wait until May when these warrants all come due. I think that's a big trigger for them when to come in and buy. But, for me, my big focus, Charlie's focus and Neil's focus on the geology. Mine's capital markets. And I always say it's like riding on a highway 140 miles per hour on a motorbike. You hit a nickel, you fly off. And I pay attention to these type of things. And I don't like to get involved in the capital markets and start, stepping in the way. So I just want these warrants to kind of, get exercised naturally, not all at once. And we could have exercised in February, acceleration, but I just thought I'd let it do its thing. We don't need the money. So waiting until May or another couple months isn't the end of the world for us. So by May 3rd, every warrant's going to be exercised, and I suspect there'll be some other news shortly thereafter of a top-up at a premium.
Okay. And then will you publish a drill plan prior to the start of drilling in May? Like, will you outline target areas?
Yeah, look, the plan is to do that probably in the next 3 weeks. And Charlie and Neil are still kind of finalizing where they want to drill. They had Alan Wilson up there. I'll let Charlie kind of jump in there. Just one thing I'll say is you do have a drill program, but when you put out news, people think it's like the Bible. You got to stick by it. But you drill things, you hit high grade certain places. Your plan does adapt, but we will give a general idea of what our plan is, or at least what the first few holes are. But I think it's a better question for the geos, Neil and Charlie, to kind of jump in. Probably Neil.
Yeah, I can jump in here. The plan is, there's the straightforward plan, which naturally continues from what we discovered at the end of last season, which is to connect the north and south zones. And if anyone's been following the story and our current understanding of how the system is shaping up, then that's a very important area to add both tonnage and grade. We see a lot of the same indications in terms of geology between the north and south zone, its position within that shoulder IP zone. And the fact that there's the presence of the same dikes that we see in the north and the south that seem to be really now strongly associated with bringing in the mineralization to the sedimentary host rocks. So the first course of action is going to be systematically exploring between the north and the south zone. But throughout the work this off season, actually, there's been some really interesting indications that potentially, that whole western flank of the porphyry stock. I know in hole 5 that we drilled last season, or sorry, 2 seasons ago in 2022, was maybe a little bit lower grade. But when we plot our sulphide species and how we're aware of how sulphide species zone in porphyry deposits, there's some really strong indications that, we might be honing in on a hotter center, actually even to the northeast of that. I mean, this is still preliminary, but this is how things are starting to plot up in 3D space. So there's going to be a bit more tweaking of the plan, and some of that is going to depend on the results of that IP survey. But there's some plans to continue pushing towards the north along that western flank, and then again seeing how it bends around to the south. We have a lot of indications that the north and south zone at this moment aren't necessarily looking like two separate lobes. These are along the same flank of what could be a larger system. So yeah, we're looking forward to exploring along that western flank to the northeast, and then down to the southeast as well. So yeah, lots developing, but yeah, there will be a plan out. But this is still exploration, right? We're defining it. So any plan we put out is going to be it's going to be the broad strokes of what we hope to explore, but we have to be flexible and adaptable to react to what we find in the holes. We might get funneled along a slightly different direction. There's just any time in exploration, there's always unexpected things. So yeah, just it's coming together.
Hey, just to jump in there, sorry, Rob. Neil, just really quickly though, maybe just to jump into what you're kind of seeing on the hyperspectral. We had a conversation yesterday. We were pretty excited about the target. I think it's a good thing to tell the audience about, and just to remind the audience that we're doing IP in 2 weeks. So the final plan is not going to be done until that IP is probably finished towards the end of April. But I think that's a good thing to talk about what you're doing with Nick that we discussed last night on the phone.
Yeah, I mean, the hyperspectral processing is a work in progress. There's a number of different interpreting that data takes some finesse. But what we're hoping and what preliminary indications are kind of showing is again similar to that sulphide speciation, where we're seeing our bornite chalcocite, which is the hotter, more sulphidized parts of the system, moving out towards chalcopyrite and pyrite. We expect to see, at least visually, we expect to see a similar zonation in the alteration mineralogy, and having that hyperspectral data is just going to add extra weight behind those interpretations. Essentially, it's going to be based on good empirical data. And so as that comes together as well, it's also going to help place us at least within a larger porphyry context. Might not be the fine targeting method that following better vectoring tools like actual copper mineralization is, but it lends a lot of support to the interpretation that this is part of a much larger system.
What role does Teck play in your drill program? Do they give you feedback on where they would like you to drill?
Yeah, they've been very good exploration partners. They've been supportive of our plan. I'm not sure if they disagreed with the plan. I'm sure they would let us know, but so far we're exploring this in a systematic way that you should approach these porphyry targets, and Teck realizes that, and Teck has been pretty supportive of the bigger step outs. They really like to see scale, but overall, they've actually been quite helpful in that hyperspectral data processing, but right now they're not really heavily involved in the planning stage. But but we've bounced, you know, the broader strokes of what we want to do, and they've been quite supportive.
So again, this is a layman's question. What does the, hyperspectral data tell you? How do you, use that data?
Yeah, it's Charlie again. I mean, I guess the way I look at it is it gives you mineralogical information, and those minerals that are formed in a hydrothermal system can be an indicator of temperature, so a proxy for temperature. And you really, in general, want to be near the hotter part of the system. So, we have all this drill data. We're now most of the way, or 2/3 of the way through collecting all the hyperspectral data, the mineralogical data, sort of meter by meter, or maybe 1 every 3 meters downhole from the rejects we get from the analytical data. So, when we look at that mineralogical information, it'll give us a big picture kind of proxy for temperature. And so using that and grade, we can say, okay, well, in this leads us in a certain direction to the hotter part of the system, or, it may indicate that there's within this large system, because we do know it's one big Eocene system, but there could be sub-centers, which I think is really important. So, when we're looking at the rocks, just the lithologies, we see enough different kind of intrusions that are driving grade. So they're coming in with grade, and they seem to be associated with grade. The term copper dikes out there, those are the sort of really spectacular bornite bearing things. But there's some earlier intrusions that also bring in grade. So, we'd like to find those centers, or center. Maybe it's just 1, maybe it is 2 or 3 or whatever, but where those hot parts of the systems kind of overlap and bring in the best grade, particularly if they overlap one another, I mean, that could be really good. And how are we going to actually find those? Well, the hyperspectral helps us do that. The grade helps us do that. Knowing the trend of these intrusions help us do that. Knowing the orientation of the host rocks helps us do that. And we put all those things together. That's great. And how are we going to determine that? Well, we're just going to determine it with systematic work. I think, chasing just down dip of a good intercept is one way of doing it. But I think, all in all, what we see in this system, it's large. I think we got to drill across the thing. We got to do pretty big step outs. They won't necessarily be targeting one individual thing, because when you look at a lot of our drill holes, we have these, really nice intercepts, like the one in 17 that we ended the year off. That's a beautiful thing. Yeah, would be nice if they were all like that. But, a lot of our intercepts are sort of plus 0.2, plus cutoff kind of grade. And, that generates very large volumes. And usually within that, we have a nice sweet spot. And we want to go across the system and see all of that and, get all of that data to help us delineate where that sweet spot, or sweet spots, which I think is probably more accurate. There's going to be a number of sweet spots, because we see that with all their drilling. I mean, there's sweet spots way up in the north, way down in the south, quite a ways out west, quite a ways out east. It'd be great if they all linked up, these really sweet spots, but they are going to be all linked up, I think, with a broader, lower grade halo, and then we target these things individually, the sweet spots within that.
Tony, you mentioned you had, Alan Wilson, who's a copper porphyry expert, visit the NAC project a few weeks ago. What did he observe, and how did he help you guys?
Yeah, really great question. Alan Wilson, for those who don't know, one of the foremost, top experts of porphyry gold. People have heard of Dick Silto. He learned everything kind of under Dick Silto, but I wasn't there. Charlie and his team were there for the 7 days that Alan Wilson was at site. So I think that's a better question for Charlie, but thanks for bringing that up. That's something we had planned for the last year.
Well, yeah, Alan's a great guy, a fun guy, loves to teach, loves to look at rocks. Unfortunately, we couldn't understand a word he was saying. He's a Scotsman, and his accent was so thick. I'm just kidding. Anyway, Alan's a great guy. he, he might even laugh at that. I'm not sure he would, but anyway. No, I worked cheek by jowl with Alan and with our crew. And we went through a bunch of holes that I hadn't looked at in detail before from the North Zone. And as Neil alluded to a little bit earlier, the North Zone, I ended up seeing lots of rocks that I saw in the South Zone. That really gave me a lot of encouragement, and it really brought home to me that maybe these dikes really are trending northerly and they're controlling grade, and we see the similar things in the north as we see in the south. So I guess the main thing that I got out of Alan's visit, I mean, he has lots and lots of small scale observations that really educate us and affirm that we're doing the right things. But the big picture thing I got out was it kind of validated the logging we're doing. And I think all the teams calls on the contacts all the way down the holes, maybe they missed the odd rock type or something like that, but they got the contacts right. So they've been looking at this stuff in a lot of detail and doing a great job. And, it gives us a lot of confidence that we're doing the right thing. And I guess, one of the comments that Alan had was that this is kind of an atypical system. When I hear that, I love it because, some of the really big systems are pretty atypical. It's not just another garden variety BC Babine Porphyry. This thing has some elements in it that you do not see in the nearby deposits like Bell and Grand Isle and Morrison, and even next door maybe in Duke. So this thing has some intrusive elements, like I said, that seem to be early in the game that bring in copper. It also has the elements that the rest of the Babine porphyries have, this biotite feldspar porphyry, but it's not the main element. The other ones don't have these monzodioritic to cyanitic copper dikes, as I've called them, the ones that carry the bornite, and they look like they have myrolitic cavities where basically the copper is kind of coming out late in the in the intrusive sequence. It's sort of a transition between magmatic and hydrothermal. So really encouraging cool looking rocks for a geo, cool looking rocks for an experienced guy like Alan. So that he's excited. He finds it atypical, and so we got to keep working at it to understand it, and it's just awesome.
Now, let me summarize some of the objectives for this 2024 program and tell me if I leave something out. So you fill in the gap between the north and south zones, probably some step out holes to the north of the north zone, and then following the south zone bend over to the east and closer to hole 2309. Are those the main objectives of the program? Is there something more or any additional color that you'd like to add about what the priorities are this year?
I think that kind of summarizes it pretty well. In terms of linking the north and south zone, I think we'd be looking at fences of holes, spaced quite a ways apart, kind of roughly, collars maybe 200 meters apart, going pretty deep because, yes, everybody wants the best grade near surface, and we'll be pointing toward that for sure. But we've got a lot of really good looking stuff down deep, and we would like to link that stuff up and put it within this big grade shell. The other thing is, there's things like the old South Zone, the historical South Zone, defined mainly by shallow drilling. We started within that South Zone, and we kind of linked up some stuff out to the west, say in holes 17, 11, and 8 with the original South Zone where we colored holes 1 and 2. But we haven't really expanded that South Zone mineralization. And again, that has kind of a biotite feldspar porphyry kind of flavor, this quartz chalcopyrite stockwork, which is kind of more of a typical Babine Porphyry look. We haven't extended that down depth along the contact of the granodiorite. So I think there's things like that individual things like that we could be chasing with a number of holes, to expand that, because it was very, very good grade, and it is actually the area that's covered by the least amount of overburden. So it's the closest thing to surface. It starts right at the bedrock surface, and there's less overburden down where we collared holes 1 and 2 than most of the other places. So
10 meters as opposed to 40 in some places.
Yeah. So, things like that. There's individual things that we'll chase. But yeah, I think what you stated was more or less correct. Fill in that gap between the north and south zones with maybe 3 holes or maybe even 4 holes on each section, 200 meters apart, and just make sure we cross from east to west with these fences of holes. So basically parallel holes, moderately steep but inclined, on sections stepping between south and north.
Okay.
I think the important thing to add is that because we have the money and we have the meters and we have the patience now, that we do have the ability to tag into, that potential super high grade system that lurks somewhere underneath where maybe we haven't drilled before. So if people are watching our drill program, if we're hitting to 1,000, 1,200 meter hole, I think that's going to kind of tell you something. If you look at those results Imperial Metals just put out on their properties, like super high grade starts at depth when you have that much mineralization at surface. I think there's a reason to believe that you don't have the same kind of thing that happens at NAC, but it's just about drilling, staying focused, and eventually tagging something hopefully high grade underneath.
And what about the southwest quartz stockwork near surface gold zone? There's some higher grade near surface gold zones there. Is that also a priority this year?
Do you mean in the upper part of hole 17, or do you mean farther to the east where the original south zone intercepts were?
I think I'm talking. Yeah. So yeah, in the upper part of hole 17. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to follow that up. I mean, Tony's a big pusher for that. It's like, okay, we got to go west of hole 17, and it's that's a valid one. If we'll miss, we'll blame it on Tony, but I don't think we will. So we will definitely drill there. I'm just being a jerk, so sorry about that, Tony.
And I'd like to open up if somebody from the audience has a question for Tony or Charlie or Neil. Go ahead and ask to activate your speaker function, and I'll call on you. So I guess my final question, to put a bow tie on this, and we'll see if we get one from the audience, but my final question would be, Tony, can you just give us a rough timeline of what we can expect over the coming months? And investors always want to know, when are we going to get the first, the first assays? It's kind of early to talk about that, but maybe you can give us a rough bit of guidance there.
Yeah, good question. I think first of all, IP starts in 2 weeks, April 15th. We'll be analyzing that data, understanding it, giving, the investors information on that IP. And there's been a lot of interest in that because of, something that, Nate Smith and our team kind of showed about that halo, that bench and shoulder theory. But that's kind of one big thing that's going to come early. Our plan is probably going to be intact, be announced to the market late April. Drilling starts, I would say, around May 15th. So drills will be turning, and you'll probably be looking at assays anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks after that. I think the big question is, do we put out 1 assay at a time, 4 assays at a time? I think we'll probably do it in batches, and results will be coming out from that point all the way throughout the end of the year and probably into 2025 if we keep that drill rig going. And, look, we've had a lot of surprises over the last 18 months. We'll probably have some more surprises for investors too, not just on the drilling front, but on the capital markets front as well. Potential big investors, etc. So just watch out for that.
Oh, surprises. Okay. All right. I like surprises. As long as they're good surprises.
You only get
Your
good surprises now, Rob.
your fellow ore group company, Awale, really put out a hell of a gold intercept yesterday morning. Do you think that the success of Awale helps you at American Eagle because you're in the same parent company, I guess?
I think it's a feather in the hat for the ore group in general. It shows that we do know what we're doing as a group. We believe in good people, and we believe in good projects. And Andrew Chubb, who runs Awale, and that ODM project, they're both world class. I think one thing that people are probably going to be looking at is you got to read the tea leaves. When you looked at Awale, it didn't come out of nowhere. They made that big discovery. They made multiple discoveries beforehand. The market just wasn't there. And what I always say is, with us, for example, American Eagle, it took 18 months for people to even know who we are. And we had 7 other great drill holes before 2317, something I would deem as high grade. But it took 2317, which was spectacular, for people to start looking at the previous ones. The same kind of thing just happened with the Awale this week. They gave that world-class result, 40 meters of 35 grams per ton. And then it allowed people to kind of look at everything else. But if you looked at some of the marketing that Andrew was doing, he teased that they hit a breccia pipe. And if you watched him walking around, where I kind of got turned on to Awale, obviously we didn't know the information, but I think 2 weeks before that, NVIDIA earnings came out, and I had sold short on NVIDIA. And I got out of my position because I saw that smile that Jensen Huang had on his face. You couldn't even wipe it off. And when I saw Andrew at PDAC, the stock was still, swimming on the floor. But he had this smile he just couldn't wipe off his face, and I just knew something was going on. And if you look at a lot of his previous videos that he had, the same kind of thing happened. He just had this big smile. He was teasing that something was going to happen. Unfortunately, there's no audience out there to watch him, but that drill hole, he's getting attention that we never even got. Funds talking to him, etc. That's an amazing hole. So, it's bringing a lot of attention to Ore Group, and then obviously with Ore Group, they're part of American Eagle and they're part of Awale. So, big ore bodies hang out with big ore bodies, and great companies hang out with great companies. And I think it's kind of still early days for a lot of the Ore Group companies, and American Eagle is one of them.
Fantastic, yeah, and that's. So you can read body language, Tony, huh? That's interesting. Some junior mining CEOs always have a grin on their face and always have a cocky way about them, even when they have no good drill intercepts. So
I think a lot of them are just. I think a lot of them are just drunk, Rob. So I'm the body language doctor. So you can show me some pictures of people. I'll tell you if they're drunk or if they're really excited about what they have. But if they don't have money, then they're just drunk.
You make a good point, because when I saw that news release February 29th, that Awale put out, I was like, why didn't I read this before? And then I looked on the YouTube video, only 200 views 2.5 weeks later. So the guy was given clues for people who were paying attention. There just weren't that many people paying attention. And that's just a challenge. That's a challenge of the junior mining sector. Need to get the word out there. Need to share your story as far and wide as possible, but not always an appetite to hear it. And so for those who are paying attention to the sector in the last several months, there's been a lot of opportunities for sure. There just hasn't been as many people paying attention. So there's more opportunities available for those that are. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, just to throw in an anecdote there. When I first saw that release 2 Mondays ago of Awale, it was at 6 a.m. in the morning. The results came out, and I messaged Steve, who's the chairman, he's the director of that company, and I said, that thing's a mine. That thing's a mine. And I didn't even know these other results were coming out. And I read them again 2 days ago on Monday. I couldn't even believe what I saw. And I didn't even know what the market would be able to do with it, because I'd never seen a drill hole like that. And kind of bring it back to American Eagle, Andrew Chubb and Neil and Charlie are all very kind of similar. Just love geology and then work like dogs. Charlie was working with his dog, guys in his 60s, logging every single hole when no one else is around on the weekends. And Andrew Chubb's doing the same thing. He had a vision for ODN, same way kind of Charlie Neal had a vision for Awale. And after that news came out, I looked at something he drew. He hand drew those graphics, things that they used to do like 20 years ago. And he drew in all the color in that. And like he was looking at every single detail. So just to kind of speak testament to the ore group and how we kind of really do identify really good geos. And we let geos do their geo thing. And that's Andrew Chubb, Neil, and Charlie. But I just want to kind of give a shout out. People see me a lot. I'm just a talking head. It's the geos that do all the work and find the thing. So just really happy that we have these guys involved on American Eagle and the ore group in general.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Very strong team at American Eagle. It's been a pleasure, Tony, Charlie, Neil. Thanks a lot. And let's do this again in a month or so when there's more to talk about. Hope you guys have a great day. And until next time, cheers.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rob.